Hi, and welcome to Podcasting 101 with Rachel. This podcast is for busy female entrepreneurs who run their own businesses and want to start a podcast or who may already have a podcast. I want to share practical information and tips on how you can get your podcast started and managing it along the way. I'll also be interviewing other female podcast hosts to give you real insight into what it's like having your own podcast. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode. Today, I have the lovely Lucy Howell from Howell Virtual with me. How are you, Lucy?
Hello, Rachel. I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on, and I'm excited to talk about Pinterest and podcasts. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and your business first off.
Okay, so I've been a general VA for about 3 years now, but have recently rebranded and moved into podcast and Pinterest management because I think the two pair really well together. And I'm a mum. My little boy is 2.5 years old. Currently at the moment struggling with tonsillitis. So, but yes, I've been doing this now for 4 years now, coming up to 4 years. So I've specialised in Pinterest a while ago, and then more recently gone into podcast management because, like I say, I think the two combine really well together, and I think if you've got a podcast, it should be on Pinterest. It's a fantastic way to advertise the business and what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like ever since, I think, I'm not sure how we came across each other. I mean, probably LinkedIn.
I think it was LinkedIn.
Yeah. And we first spoke about podcast and Pinterest, and it is something I have to admit, at the time of recording in November, and this episode is due to come out in January, I haven't done anything with Pinterest, but it has been the one little thing that's been like niggling at me ever since I met you, being like, and I kept hearing other people talking about Pinterest and especially with the benefits to podcasting. One of my clients, Hannah and Nicole from Showing It Solo, they do pins and things for theirs as well. So she's already talked about, like, she just like on a mass produces them all. So I thought it'd be best first to just have a little talk about like what Pinterest actually is, because I think there's a few misconceptions about what Pinterest actually is. It's like, and then kind of like why it's specifically good for podcasts.
Yeah, so I think one of the misconceptions with Pinterest, I've been using Pinterest like a lot of people for probably since it first started. A lot of people are under the huge misconception that Pinterest is a social media platform. And whilst it is a social platform on media, it isn't a social media platform. It is a search engine. It's exactly the same as Google. It's just a more visual search engine. It works exactly the same way with SEO. And unlike LinkedIn and Instagram predominantly, and Facebook, I think, but they're filtering that out a little bit. Rather than using hashtags to find things, Pinterest relies on keywords. That's how you enhance your searchability and your visibility on Pinterest. But there are so many misconceptions that, it's all, I like this flower pot, or I like this wedding dress, and I'll pin it, and that's it, and that's all everyone does on Pinterest.
Yeah, I do it for hairstyles.
Exactly. And whilst we're all guilty of it, which is what I use it for, I think, I like that. It's, as far as marketing goes, it's actually probably one of the stronger platforms to market a business or a service or a product on. The demographics for Pinterest, in terms of that, with Instagram, for example, when you go onto Instagram, they like to keep you in that platform. So when you click on something, that's why you can't get clickable links and things like that. You have to physically copy it and go to Chrome and then open a new page to get to someone's page. In Pinterest actually like you to go off their platform. They encourage that, and that's why you can click on a pin and it will take you directly to someone's funnel or website or marketing campaign that they've got. That's how Pinterest works. They like you to come off the platform to go and shop and buy, and the majority of people that are on Pinterest are on there to buy a product. I think the last count was something like 80% of people are on Pinterest to buy a product, not to browse a product. And unlike with Instagram, where you're unlikely to be found unless you have got a certain amount of followers or a certain amount of, posts and things like that. Unless you're kind of, one of the major players on Instagram, you're just gonna get lost in the noise somewhere. So little businesses, small businesses, don't really stand a chance on Instagram to get noticed and get people buying their products. Pinterest, like I say, with carefully planned keywords and doing your profile correctly and putting the right keywords in, you could go viral without having any single followers, any history of Pinterest. You could open a Pinterest account, have a really good Pinterest manager that will, show you where to put your keywords and enhance your profile properly. And with one really good pin, that pin could go viral in a certain amount of time. It's not the same as Instagram or Facebook. It just doesn't work that way. And I always say to people, if they don't sort of believe me about it being a search engine, I'll give you a little test, is to go on Google now and try and find, just type in something like white wedding dress. And in the images, I can guarantee that those images will have come from Pinterest. The code at the bottom will be from www.pinterest.co.uk or .com, depending where you are in the world. And if you click on that, it will take you to Pinterest. It will take you to the person's platform, and then you can go and buy that product, that white wedding dress that you've been looking for. That's how Pinterest works. But you won't find something the same from Instagram, for example. It just doesn't pull through to Google the same.
No, and that's one thing that is quite frustrating about those kind of platforms. I mean, LinkedIn, even though you can put links in the body of your posts like you can't do on Instagram that highlight, they don't favour those links, and you've got to put them a certain way or put them in the comments or whatever the latest algorithm hack is or whatever which is very confusing and makes it difficult to schedule your posts and all those types of things. So I like the fact that is encouraging you can go create the pin and someone can click on it directly and take it to whatever the piece of content you want it to take you to, video, episode, blog, whatever that is. I really like that. Seems really powerful.
Yeah, and with podcasting, for example, I use podcasts as kind of your main source of, like, for people that are struggling with content, use a podcast as your main piece of content and everything else can funnel off it. So, you start your podcast, you do your podcast episode, and then you could transcribe it and, you've got a blog. You can take little clips out of that transcription and, you've got your social captions for media, for Facebook and Instagram and all of that. You can pull things off it. You could do an audiogram. Audiograms you can do on Pinterest. So you could actually have a pin with your audiogram on there, linking directly to Apple or Spotify or wherever your podcast is, or or directly back to your website if you've got it embedded on your website. And then obviously once people are on your website, they can then click into your email marketing and follow you and subscribe that way. So it's so powerful. Pinterest is amazing, and I think that, like I say, if you haven't got Pinterest for your business, I think everyone needs it, and especially podcasters. Like I say, it works really well for advertising your podcast, and ultimately getting you the results that you wanted from your podcast, if that's, advertising a service or a product or something along those lines.
Yeah. So time is a factor, is the main reason why I haven't decided to invest or spend, create that to go into Pinterest. Yeah. Because, thinking about it's another thing to do, to implement into the process that I've got into. I mean, I break down, my podcast is my main piece of content, and then I use it in that way to streamline my marketing. Yeah. How much kind of extra time? Is it quite easy to create the pins off of, once you created your social media content or whatever, is it quite easy to create those pins off of that and batch them perhaps as well?
Yeah, so there is a platform that's sort of specifically designed for Pinterest for scheduling pins, which is called Tailwind.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
And Tailwind is fantastic because Pinterest, they like you to produce new content. That's what they, rather than repinning someone else's content, they prefer you to put out new content. That's the content that they're pushing at the moment. That's their algorithm. So whilst you could have a pin saying something along the lines of, you know, top 10 reasons to listen to my podcast, and then that could be your first pin. A brand new pin could be 10 reasons why you should listen to my podcast. Another pin could just be changing the colours on that top 10 reasons to listen to my podcast. Or so you've suddenly got 3 pins with pretty much the same title, but they're slightly different. So it's not that time consuming to change the pins. And they recommend sort of 3 to 5 pins per day. It sounds a lot. But when you're just tweaking, you know, a colour, or you're just changing one little image on it, you've suddenly got a brand new pin, so it's not that time consuming. Tailwind is fantastic, because what you do with Tailwind is you put in your title, your call to actions, what you want people to do. Do you want them to click the link? Do you want them to click the pin? You want them to follow or subscribe? You put in your title of your thing, so top 10 reasons to listen to my podcast, and it will create multiple versions of different pins based on different colours. It will design different pins for you. So all you need to do then is go, oh, I like that one, I like that one, and I like that one, and I like that one, and I like that one. So you've got 5 pins all of a sudden, and then you can just schedule those 5 pins. So you can do it on Tailwind within a matter of seconds, or you can do it manually yourself. It's obviously more time consuming in doing it manually version, but Tailwind is brilliant.
Is that on the free version, or is it a paid version?
So free version, you get, I think it's something along the lines of, you get up to 100 pins on the free version. That's like per month, which sounds a lot, but when you're being asked to do 5 pins a day or more to kind of make it noticeable, that doesn't really tend to go that far. They may have even reduced it down to 50 now, I think, maybe, actually. Yeah, I think it might even be 50. So it is generally more on the paid version that you're going to get the most benefit out of Tailwind. But as I say, you could do, you know, the free version and then do the rest manually.
So
you
depending
could
on
combine
what
the 2. Yeah, so you can combine, you know, do a week's worth of your free version on Tailwind, and then do another 3 weeks on your, you know, your what are my words? On your manual version, that's the word I'm looking for.
Are there any other schedulers that schedule to Pinterest, or is it just Tailwind?
So most do. I use Buffer for like my general social media, just because I think Hootsuite is as great as Hootsuite is, it's just ridiculously expensive. Buffer I love. It's easy. It syncs really well with what I want it to do. The only thing with other platforms like Buffer and Hootsuite, and I think there's another one called Crowdfire, and then you've got Metrical and things like that. All of them are great, but sometimes they have problems with adding in the sort of like the clickable pin link. So with Buffer, for example, you can put your header and your title, and it'll give you what do you want the pin to do. But it doesn't always generally tend to work. I found a lot of my pins that I've scheduled, they're not actually going to the link that I want them to.
That's frustrating, isn't it?
Which is
Can't
annoying.
rely on it.
But Pinterest have got their own scheduler version. So you can actually directly schedule on Pinterest, and you can batch the pins on Pinterest. So that's what I do. So I will go in, I'll create a pin, drop it into one, and then just do my title and everything and my keywords, and then I'll just click plus, and I've got 5 then, and I just drop them in then straight away, and that's it, and they're done. So it's I actually prefer just doing it directly on Pinterest and forgetting the other scheduler platforms, but Tailwind or Pinterest is my version of doing it.
Yeah, I do try to batch my content. I've had episodes on this podcast talking about batching, depending on what works for you. My friends Hannah and Nicole, they do 6 months worth of content in one go. They actually had a full circle content challenge in October, and I went to the masterclass, and I knew they batched their content. They always have some wonderful brand photos as well. And they're not in the same province in Canada, so they meet up like every 6 months and kind of do their stuff. But it's amazing how much stuff they get out and manage to create from the podcast episode.
Yeah.
You know, like talking about repurposing, like, you know, it was amazing, absolutely brilliant what they do with it. And I think she might batch all of her pins as well and do that. It just depends on what works for you and your schedule when it comes to batching and trying to do. But I know that when I try to do them on a 4 weekly basis, but recently it's been like eking out. And then I find myself, I'm still creating because I haven't left myself enough time or something's come up, you know, all those things. And I'm thinking perhaps maybe some things like your evergreen content, you know, have like perhaps for pins and things, if you can just get into a flow and allocate this much time, you can do you know, create all these pins that can be great for your podcast or whatever it is that you're trying to for your business as well as your podcast. So when you started doing it, what kind of I'm just thinking about the engagement that you get on the pins. So compared to the other social media platforms that you do you get just like so much more?
So I'll be completely honest, my own Pinterest, if anyone goes on my own Pinterest, is terrible. It's dire because I just haven't got the time to do my own Pinterest. I very occasionally schedule stuff onto Pinterest. It's but for I think the other thing with Pinterest as well, compared to say Instagram, the half-life, getting technical, of a pin now is so much longer. It's longer lasting than it is on Instagram. So Instagram is called Instagram for a reason. It's instant. That's what it means. So any engagement you get is kind of an instant thing. And then once that kind of initial half-life of your Instagram post has gone, that's it. It'll never get found again on Instagram. It won't get re-brought up until someone reposts it or shares it or along those lines. Pinterest is a slightly slower burner for a platform, so it can take on average about 3 months for you to see good results, for it to measure how well you're doing on Pinterest. So I always say to clients, look, you need to give me 3 months with Pinterest to be able to see the results of it. Don't go checking it tomorrow. You probably won't get any views. There'll probably be like 3 people on there. And then 3 months later, it'll be, you know, up in the hundreds of thousands, or it'll be even, you know, some people have got millions of viewers and millions of followers on Pinterest. So the pins last a lot longer on Pinterest than they do on Instagram. So when you're cycling content and podcasts and things like that, I always say to people, you know, if you've got like a Christmas offer, for example, you want to start marketing it in around August. You want to start putting your Christmas pins, your Christmas products, everything that you're going to do for Christmas out in August on Pinterest, so that by the time Christmas comes up and people are searching Christmas gifts for my husband or Christmas gifts for mom and things like that, your pins have already had that time to get that traction and get that growth, so that they're already right on the top of the platform. They're already right there.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. So it's had time for people to view it and to get because I mean, when I look at some pins and things, I don't know how recent some of them are. And when I look back, I like looking for my hairstyles, you know, just to use that as an example, you know, some of them I've seen before and they come up multiple times. So with that, like you're saying with Instagram, and like you say, once you post it, it's out in the ether, and then it's less likely to be, you know, pulled back up again.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you say, the longevity with Pinterest with the pins is much more.
Exactly. So I've just double checked the facts on this, right? So the half-life of a Pinterest pin is 3.5 months. So I was right in terms of the 3.5 months. It's 3.5 months. So a pin will last on Pinterest in the visibility for it to be found for 3.5 months. Now, to put that into perspective for people that are on other platforms, a tweet it'll only last for 24 minutes. So any engagement you get is 24 minutes. That's it. And then it'll die, it'll go, and no one will see it again, you know, unless anyone reposts that exact same pin, same tweet. That's it. The half-life of a Facebook post is 90 minutes, so it's slightly longer than Twitter, but not much longer. So an hour and a half, and a Facebook post, any engagement you get, that's the maximum engagement you're going to get. So in concept, a Pinterest pin is 1,680 times longer than a Facebook post. So if you've got content and you've got a product, it needs to be on Pinterest, because it's going to last so much longer on Pinterest than it is anywhere else. Which is why, again, it goes back to the thing of it's not a social media platform.
Yeah. So also I'm thinking, so I've got, at least 30 odd episodes in the bank, potentially more when this airs. So, and I've created audiograms for those, and I've created social media posts and things like that. So would you recommend, as a starting point, creating pins using all of, like, repurposing the old content?
Definitely.
Not saying not old, but starting there, and then kind of creating stuff with the new, because a lot of this information, and it's easy to forget, and I talk about this a lot, that it's still relevant. A lot of it is still very relevant to your audience. If somebody's just discovering my podcast now, they've got all these other episodes that could be helping them. So that would probably be a really great place to start, is looking at what content you've already created and creating the pins. Is that what you kind of recommend if someone's kind of starting out on Pinterest?
Definitely. And the 3 to 5 pins per day, that sounds terrifying, but really, say for example for you, so you could put one pin with a direct link to the podcast itself, but then you could do another pin off the back of that. I don't know obviously how your kind of setup is for your content and but you say you use your podcast as your pillar for your content. So you could do one pin for your podcast, so the direct link to Apple or Spotify or wherever it is. If you're pulling that information and you've got a blog to that same podcast, do a pin to the blog, and then you can do an audiogram. So you've got 3 pins already off the back of one podcast episode. And then you could just do 2 others. I don't know where else your other posts go to, but if you've got a marketing or a offer or anything like that you've got, there's another pin that you can do. So you can say, listen to my podcast, grab this here, or grab my top 10 reasons for doing a podcast, or whatever your promo is. So you want to kind of, what I tend to tell people is not to post the same link. So for 5 pieces of content, you don't want to be posting the same link. So you don't want to be saying, you've got your 5 different pins, but each of those pins are going to exactly the same place, like your website, for example. Because what will happen is you can actually get kind of like, essentially kind of like shadow banned on Pinterest if you keep repurposing the same link. So what you want to do is you want to say kind of, they don't like that. They like you to go to different places. So with one podcast episode, do one for your website, one for your blog. It's still on your website, I would assume, probably, but it's taking its different link, right? Slightly different link.
So that's okay then, as long, even if, because I've got my podcast is integrated into my website, but it's, if you click on each individual episode, it's got a different kind of URL link, so that would be okay.
That would be fine,
okay.
And you're not going to get, automatically shadow banned if you've got one podcast episode and you do post the same link, because they all go to the same place. It's only if you're every single day, for example, like a lot of service providers, like like us, for example, that don't have a physical product to sell. We're selling a service. Obviously, if you've got a shop and you've got products, then you're going to have a different link. You're going to have different shoes, handbags, dresses, everything that you can advertise. But for us, it's a bit more difficult. So if a lot of service providers all of their content is on their website. So their blog is on their website, their offers come off their website, and it does make it difficult to find different links. But you're not going to get shadow banned straight away. It's only if you're consistently doing it and you're only posting to, howlvirtual.co.uk, howlvirtual.co.uk, and that's it. And that's the only link you ever do. What you want to do is mix it up a little bit, take someone to your blog, take someone to your homepage, take someone to your Linktree account if you've got it, take someone to your email marketing to sign up over there and do it. Just mix it up a little bit. That's all.
Yeah.
It just stops you
That'll
from getting
help.
shouted at by Pinterest Pinterest prison.
So what would be like your top tip for someone with a podcast wanting to start with Pinterest? What would be your kind of like top piece of advice or top tip?
So I would say top tip on Pinterest, don't be frightened of it. That's the main thing. I think a lot of people kind of think because they don't know a lot about the platform and they don't understand how it works, don't focus on it too much. My top tip would be know your audience of to who you're advertising to. So is it women in business? Is it mums? Is it women over 50? Is it men that you're marketing to? Know your target audience and really get that in your head, because your keywords that you need to use are going to come off the back of that audience. You don't want to be selling a product to women in business and then only finding that, teenagers under the age of 14 are looking at your pins. It's irrelevant. You don't want it. And if that happens, you've done something wrong with the targeting. So you need to be really clear and really specific in your head of who you're marketing your products to. So there's a really easy way of doing it, but I'll give you a link to that and show you how to show your audience how to find keywords. But it's really easy to do it, but you need to know in your head who you're marketing your product to in order to be able to get that target audience found on Pinterest.
I mean, that is really important, and that you should in your podcast have a good idea of who you want your podcast to reach as well. So hopefully it can be quite hard narrowing some of those things down, but it's a really good exercise to do for your business and for your podcast in general, is really knowing who you want to target and what keywords are going to be relevant for those people. Definitely. Well, thank you, Lucy. It's been such a great chat today.
No problem.
You have some news as well, don't you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your news?
Yes, so I have got a little bit of news. So I am in the process of setting up my own podcast, which is going to be called, based on my name and my tagline, How Can I Help?
I love that. Good.
It just seemed like so it's going to be a podcast basically with mums and mums in business predominantly. I'm not discounting dads, obviously I want to get another perspective, but originally it's going to be mums in business, just to kind of have a chat with them really and find out any issues that they've had with being a mum and maybe working from home and things like that when they've got children. Like I say, I've got a 2.5-year-old and it's so difficult, but we do it and we are doing it. And I look on LinkedIn every day and see so many amazing women out there that are like, they're running a 6-figure business, or more even, and they've got 2, 3, 4 kids even, and they're all toddlers, or they're all at home and things like that. So it would be great to kind of talk to other women and other mums and find out what their kind of key tips are for other people, and what their struggles have been as well with getting there. So that's kind of where we're going with the podcast. I really like listening to real life stories, and hearing how people who are just like you, often it's quite easy to kind of think that you're alone in it, and even though you aren't, it's so easy to fall into that feeling. Like when I started, my first podcast was Virtually Inspiring Podcast, that was talking to VAs and how they got for their journeys, and that was something that me at the beginning of my journey was really interested in knowing, like, how did you actually just start and do this? And a lot of them were mums as well, and it's so interesting hearing people's route to it, and it's all very different. So I think that's it's going to be a really good podcast to listen to in the mumpreneur. I know some people don't like that. I know. That's why I try and say mums in business. But...
Yeah, do you know, the jury's still out. I get why people don't like mumpreneur, because it's like saying womenpreneur. You can't be an entrepreneur. But I think in terms of I don't necessarily think it's I don't think of it as a derogatory thing. I think of it as just like specifically. It's like
it's catchy, it's just a slang way of saying. It's just a slang way of saying mum in business, isn't it? awesome person in business. That's it. So
yeah, that's a bit longer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Personpreneur. Yeah. Personpreneur. Yeah.
We won't go into that.
Well, do you want to let us know where we can find you if people are interested in having Pinterest for their podcast? Do you want to let us know the best place to find you and where you hang out?
Yeah, so my website is www.howlvirtual.co.uk. Facebook, Instagram, all my social media handles are at Howell Virtual, so pretty simple and straightforward to find me.
That's great. I'll link it all in the show notes as well, just so that make it easier for people to find you as well. And thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about Pinterest. I'm sure I do have some more questions, so potentially we might do a follow-up episode. And definitely you've inspired me to be a little bit more proactive with getting into Pinterest. I just like those odds, let's say not odds, but you know, the interaction and the engagement you were talking about. It sounds extremely exciting, so I would think I might have a look at that. So thanks very much, Lucy, and we'll speak to you soon.
No problem at all, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to connect with me or get in touch, then head on over to my website. If you liked the episode, then I'd love it if you could leave me a review in your chosen podcast app. Your feedback is much appreciated. See you next time.